Hi, my name is Gia Hamilton, and thank you for joining me for Live Your Purpose Artfully, a video series that looks at creatives and innovators who are living, working, and visiting the city of New Orleans. I am really thrilled to get a chance to sit down and talk to you. One, because you and I have worked together before at the residency program. We've become friends over the years, but I'm just so deeply proud of the work that you've done. It's such powerful work. But we discovered on that trip that we'd actually gone to elementary school together.
Yeah, so I saw an Instagram post that you did with Angelique Williams. Well, I don't know her last name now, if she's there. And I was like, why does she know Angelique? We went to this tiny school in the Marigny. Why does she know Angelique? And so then I asked her that Minnesota trip, and then you revealed that you went to the same school, and I was like, no, you didn't, because it was a school of maybe 90 people.
How did we not connect?
I don't know.
It's so funny. Well, I know you as New Orleans-born printmaker who also has a background in graphic design, and someone who's just been on the rise in New Orleans for just doing really large-scale, prints that really delve into tropes, stereotypes, things that really sting us and can be really traumatizing in terms of identity. How do you identify?
As a person? Black female.
Yes. Yes, and?
From New Orleans. I was doing work that was more centered around gender before I moved back to Louisiana. And then once I moved back to Louisiana to go to grad school at LSU, I started doing work that was more about collective consciousness and just surrounding issues that surrounded Black identity and communities and what that means to be Black, and then researching and what it meant to have laws created to keep you in a certain place, and what it meant to walk in the street, what it meant to always be conscious of your Blackness when other people get to walk around and never think about their identity. When they think about their identity, they're like, oh, I'm a part Irish, or I'm a part Italian. And isn't that interesting? They don't think about it in a way that is stigmatizing. So I started making work that was more around just collectively being Black.
Yeah. This collective experience, right? Describe for me the scale. I mean, I think that's the first thing that I noticed when I first saw your work was just it's big. It feels larger than life, and it almost confronts you when you're in a space. What made you decide to work that big, and
so that is process? The purpose.
Yeah.
So the work is big, and it's all narrative. So it's a person or one or two people, and usually one of them is looking out. It almost feels like they're looking right past you, but the look, it's almost a look of indifference and defiance at the same time.
Yeah. That
they're looking right past you with, and so the scale is to just really amplify that feeling of the person who is looking right past you.
Yes.
So they're generally they tend to be 5 feet tall or more.
Yeah.
I'm really lucky to be able to print that large in my studio, and I've tried to go smaller for some instances, and I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Unless it's a portrait or more like the lithographs that I've done that are smaller, but in general, yes, I like to work big.
Yeah. The other thing that really struck me about your work, so I mean that grabbed my attention first, but you have just a really interesting use of color and patterns, and so I noticed not all, but many of them had quilting patterns or some kind of nod to fiber or that sort of work. And so I was just curious what some of those reference points were for you personally.
So the quilting patterns are, I get fabric from, they're a nod to art history. So they're a nod to just the lack of art history when it comes to people of color backgrounds in the world. So you learn about Egyptian and Grecian art in the BCs or the ADs, barely AD, and then there's like a black hole period, and then you get to medieval, Renaissance, Baroque, modern, European art. And you never come back to the people of color, especially Africa. It's as if every advancement that they had in technology and art was done so long ago, it's irrelevant now, and they haven't advanced since 600 BC. And it reinforces that stereotype of primitive. So all of my work, also as well, every stereotype that is narrated in each piece comes down to one boiling point, and that is this idea that people of color are primitive. And so the quilts in themselves, I get fabrics from Joann's and Hancock's, and they're generally in the ethnic section, and I go home and scan them. And I initially was doing only freedom quilts, but now I do just American style quilts, which are applique quilts, and the fabrics themselves will usually have like a person with a jug on their head, or a safari scene, or someone dancing while beating on a drum. And while there's absolutely nothing wrong, or there's nothing about it that is not beautiful. Mm-hmm. But it reinforces this idea of the primitive, and so it's a nod to art history to put these in my print. Put these as a background in my print, because I think that it is really the string that sort of weaves all the prints together.
Absolutely. And it also, it very formally and visually addresses a stereotype. And so much of your work deals with really pervasive stereotypes. And of course, growing up in a city like New Orleans, there's so many ways that people identify here as a person of color, but also by tribe, kind of family name, and where you went to school, and where you can sort of situate yourself. There's that saying that like there's a piece of truth in every stereotype, which people kind of latch on to. How are you specifically wanting to address stereotypes in your work? Is it kind of, it doesn't feel one note. It feels like you're asking questions. What are some of the questions that you're asking in the work?
So I'm asking the viewer to evaluate their whole thought process when it comes to viewing another person. Stereotypes to me are arbitrary, made up, completely fictional differences between one human to another human. There is no truth in the stereotype besides the fiction that is created by the media and by social biologists when they try to find genetic differences between people to either say that this medicine works, or that this behavior is just more apparent, or to say that something that is a social abnormality is a part of someone's culture, and to focus on that, and people tend to think, well, for instance, when you think about like drug use, people think, well, there's more people arrested for drug use in this community, so they're using drugs more. It's like, well, no, their communities are being policed more. Yeah. So when you boil it down, I'm trying to get people to really look inward and find the truth. Not find the truth within themselves, because truth within yourself is biased to find the truth.
So I'm thinking about, I've seen some work, installation-based work of yours, and also some stop anime or some media and based work, some video work. What made you, to explore those mediums and that kind of work, and can we expect to see like more of that kind of work from you?
Yeah, so the video work was something that I did when I was in grad school, and I really wanted to bring my characters from my print to life and have them interact with other prints and have them act out stereotypes on each other.
Yeah.
And so then I made this, well, I made this almost, I shouldn't say true to life because it's not true to everyone's life, but I made this animation where the characters interact, and they end up living out the stereotype of destroying the beautiful white world around them, but then it explodes with all of these black babies, and everyone dies at the end.
It's very morbid.
Yeah. It's like the initial fear of black everything. Well, what happens if black people become citizens? Well, what happens if black people are armed? What happens if black people work side by side with us? What happens? And it's always like this, like doom, destruction, death. It's every era. It's always the climate is just like, well, of course it ends with doom and destruction.
Doom and destruction, yes.
So then I did also this installation when I was part of Staple Good Collective that was around catcalling. And it's something that I noticed more when I moved back to New Orleans. And I lived in Tampa, so I was just in Florida on the other side. But when I moved back to New Orleans and then visiting other cities, and then noticing how just pervasive it was in New Orleans, and it just got me thinking, and it got me a little mad, so I made a piece about it. So I made these.
What specifically? Like, if there was like a New Orleans kind of catcall, what is the New Orleans catcall that you hear often?
The New Orleans catcall,
not to be repeated.
Not to be repeated is, "Can I be your friend?"
Yes, I've heard that one. Can I be your friend?
Can I be your friend?
It's very like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood gone wrong. It's a little strange.
Can I be your friend? Or
do you have a husband?
Yes.
Do you have a husband? Yeah.
Do you have a husband? Skip, kids, all that. Do you have a husband?
So I got say red, say sexy slim.
My sister gets that all the time.
Yeah.
Because she's Redbone, as you say in New Orleans. Both of my sisters are. So my youngest sister looks like she's straight from the DR, so people normally speak to her in a different language, and she's like, "I'm black," and they're like, "Okay." But yeah. So coming back here and just women don't. It's not nice. I don't need to be validated on the street. I don't need to know that you think I'm worth walking past you because of the way that you perceive I look. I really don't care. I'm just trying to get from point A to point B. And I think what people don't understand also is that when a woman is walking alone in particular in a space, she feels rather vulnerable to her surroundings, and not because she feels like her life is in constant danger, but you're taught stranger danger from when you're up to whenever. So just when someone confronts you that you don't know, and they're suddenly walking side by side with you, they're asking you all these questions, like they want to get to know you in a sexual way. You just like, it screams danger in your brain, even if they mean it as a compliment, even if they're saying that, well, you're beautiful and I just want you to feel beautiful, so I'm telling you that you are, and then I'm going to hit on you. And you're like,
it usually doesn't just end with the compliment, right? Because I feel like I take those very differently. Like when someone's like, "Oh, you're beautiful," it's like, "Thank you," and we keep going. But when it's loaded with an agenda, it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I made this piece where there was nothing but like banana leaves and bananas and legs going everywhere, and it was sort of very hyacinth. It was very lush. And then there was a curtain of vaginas that you had to open to get to.
Vaginas is very Josephine Baker-esque, and
So I channel her. I used to channel her a lot when I was thinking about stereotypes. I don't have a love-hate relationship with Josephine Baker. She broke down and enacted a lot of stereotypes that were placed against women of color for money. It made her a living. So she animated lots of fetishes for a white public, and I just don't I just don't with Josephine Baker. So I channel her a lot. And this piece definitely channeled Josephine Baker with the vagina curtain, with the meat curtain you have to walk through to get to the bananas.
This is before Nasty Women and before there was the Nasty Woman.
Yeah.
This was a while back.
Yeah, this was 2014-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the response? Like, were you, when you're at your own show, are you kind of like the person who's kind of observing the room? Or are you in the mix? And like, how do you interact with the viewer as they're like taking in the work?
Oh, I'm in the mix.
Yeah.
So I'm like just kind of there, and people will come up, especially young people, come up and ask me questions all the time, or they tell me. James and I talk about it all the time because he feels like he has a face like this too. I work in the Bywater, and I can walk from where I work to Satsuma and talk to 5 different people who have just seen me walking to Satsuma, and they're like, "Oh, she seems approachable. Just gonna talk to her."
Yeah. Yes.
I get that.
You do have that approachable face.
I get that
friendly.
a lot. I know all the old ladies that live on the block, like all of them. So, but that's how it is at all of my openings too. People are like, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna ask her."
Yeah.
So I end up talking to people, especially young people, the whole time. But people were, young ladies in general, all backgrounds were like, "Yeah, this is, I don't know, I moved here and this is kind of like weird." I'm like, "Yeah, I know."
So you're literally like, we're reflecting people's experiences with this show and with these pieces. Did it make them feel affirmed or better that like, okay, yes, this is something that I'm affirmed in my discomfort of, or was there anybody who challenged?
So yes, because there are lots of people who challenge. I have friends who challenged me on that were like, "No, the people are just paying you a compliment. No, it's nice to be noticed in public. No, it's I'm like, headphones on, don't talk to me. I guess it's like 2 different personalities as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm always like, well, I don't see them talking to young men. I don't see them telling young men good morning. If you're going to be courteous, be courteous.
Yeah.
Don't just be courteous to me because of my
gender.
I like it.
Yes.
So yeah, there was a lot of pushback, but I think that the people that did talk to me felt reaffirmed in their feelings about it. Yeah. Like they're not alone. Like they're not crazy for feeling like it's inappropriate to approach someone in a public space like that. It should be a given that person will feel vulnerable because of their gender and uncomfortable because you're a stranger.
Yeah. So, it's super interesting because, I love having these conversations with artists and with creatives about, our role in this world, in society, right? I think as creative people, we get to have many different roles. I don't think that we have to kind of like stick to one role. But in this case, the role of the artist. What do you see as the role of the artist in this kind of macro big sense? And then like where do you see yourself fall in the context of like the contemporary art world and society?
Well, for me, and this is just for me because I understand the argument against it, but for me, I feel like it's a very awesome gift that I have, that I can express myself visually.
Yeah.
To me, it's a language. It's perfecting a language and using that very special language, that very unique language to you to express something to everyone else. And when you don't, like any language, if I'm speaking gibberish to you, if I don't have words, if I'm talking in circles, then it's just like, well, what? Well, don't talk to me. Like, what's the point? Like, what are you doing?
What are you talking about?
Right. So my role as an artist, I think, is as a communicator, just as someone who wants to relay a message, someone who wants to make a difference on a more interpersonal level with people. Yeah. So not like, I don't have to like make this grand scale project that then there's a survey that follows to see whose mind did it change. Like I want to connect with people one-on-one when they come to view my work.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And so this communicator. Do you consider yourself a translator of sorts? Like, are you trying to act in that way, or do you feel like that's someone else's job to translate visual language? And
I do feel like a translator, and I think it comes across in the titles of my pieces.
Mm-hmm. I've noticed they're very long.
They're like a pair. People are like, well, what is this work? I'm like, hold up, let me put my glasses on, read the title, because it's a paragraph. But yeah, I do feel like a translator in the sense that initially when I was making this work in grad school, people thought that it was insight into Black culture. And that's why I moved from blackface.
Fascinating.
Yes, but like, like the hypersexual female. So this is about like the promiscuity that's a part of Black culture and the single mother. And I was like, no, what? Did you read the title? I'm like, no. So, the titles were really simple back then. So then I started making a dissertation out of my titles, and then I put everyone in watermelon face to sort of conjure the Sambo character from the early 1900s, late 1800s that embodied stereotypes against Black people, so that people knew, so that it would give people clues, just little insights, symbols all throughout the work.
Yeah.
And the Sambo character, watermelon face, helps to clue people in that this is not me, a Black person, letting you into my culture. This is about American culture and what it means to be Black in a Western culture that perceives you as other when you've been here since they've been here.
Yeah. It's good, and it's good for you to be able to make that distinction. So, I mean, what lineage do you consider yourself from? Like, are there groups of artists or people, writers, other creatives that you feel like we're having this same conversation, and I'm a part of this larger conversation that they're having?
I feel like I'm trying to live up to having the same conversation as Bell Hooks.
Yes.
I'm like, yes. Praise hands. Hallelujah. I'm trying to converse with her.
We have to have tea then. We have to invite Bell Hooks.
Oh my gosh.
And have tea of some sort or a meal. Yes. I'm curious. And I ask these questions about abundance because it's so interesting to me to see how expansively people will think about their careers, their life, their passion, when resources are met, when they have all the resources that they need. So that's my question. If you had all the things that you needed, what would you be making? Who would you be working with? And, what things would you experiment with that maybe you're not quite doing just yet? I know that I would experiment with creating atmospheres in different communities. So I would experiment with creating atmospheres in very rural communities, whether that meant that city people would have to drive out to these areas to see them, but they were very accessible to people that already lived in a rural community. Mm-hmm.
And I would put environments in an urban community, like just in like a city. If there was a building that was due for renovation, but it was going to be a few months, so then you could do something for a few months, something like that, so that I would narrate a space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you thinking painting, 2D work, installation? What would you...
I would do installation work, I think, but it would still be print-based. Like, I'm like, every time I think about installation, I'm like, I'm going to print this, and then I'm going to cut it out, and then I'm like, why does it have to... I could just, like... I could just print this on a printer.
You're a printmaker purist.
Yeah.
You love this particular medium. Yeah, that makes sense.
I can't think outside of print. No, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, so this idea of really being able to engage with the public and have lots of different people be able to experience the work, see the work in different spaces. And so you'd be activating space all over. I like to look at them like we might at some point connect around these resources. So it's always helpful for me to know like what people are thinking. Tell me some of the other things that you're like passionate about that's important to you. I mean, I know that you're a mother
Yes. We're both mothers
we are
of
both
only boys.
Only boys, all
So I remember an artist told me, he was like, okay, so now you have children, all of your work is going to be about mothering. And I was like, you don't know me. No, it's not.
You like to prove me wrong.
I was like, it's about the collective experience. But I do see my work falling more into gender roles in the Black community, and gender roles in general in the public, and how that might play into. So there's a lot of talk in New Orleans right now around gentrification, especially around like Airbnb and how that is contributing to gentrification in New Orleans. And for me, one of the things that I see when I see gentrification is I see a lot of Black mothers not being able to claim their space, being pushed out of their space. I mean, because bottom line, there are a lot of Black mothers in New Orleans, and Black mothers are seen stereotypically as being the birthers of societal ills. So you have crime in a city, you have drug use in a city. I'm not talking about particularly in New Orleans, but just in a community in general. Where in other communities, the opioid crisis might be blamed on the doctors that prescribed the opioids in the first place. And other communities, in our community, it's blamed on the mothers who didn't have proper oversight of their children and let them do this thing that led to this thing, and now they're this thing, and now they have to be criminalized. Now they're criminalized and not seen as a fully human being, they're seen as a criminal. Black moms get, it's a hard road for Black moms. And so there's, I see my work addressing that more and more. And not really in particular like Black mom of boys, but just being a fertile Black woman.
Clearly, because you have twins.
Yes.
They're adorable. You got toddlers. They're these amazing. That's amazing. Like age, I think, where they like are in constant learning mode, and they're just absorbing and like eating up concepts and words and things.
They are. They're bossy, and they're definitely now. When they were younger, you could be like, they'd be like, "Oh, I did your butt out," and you're like, "Oh, you want this cup right here?" Like, yeah. You know, they're like, "Yeah, okay."
Yeah.
And now you're like, "Oh, you want this cup right here?" No. I'm like, Now I have to figure out what you said. What does "fushishu" mean? I don't know. You want a fashion show? You know, it's like that right now. It's like, oh no.
Yeah. How do you feel like your mothering differs from your mom? Like in your mom's generation? Like
oh my gosh. So my mom still comes to my house and she'll ask James everything. My husband.
Yes.
But it is not a secret in our household. James has no idea how much the electric bill is. He has no clue how much our mortgage is. So my parents are my mom, not my dad. My dad is a hardcore feminist.
My dad is too. He actually admitted it at like 76 or 77. Like he was just like,
yeah. My dad had 3 girls.
Equitable division of labor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad's the same. He's like, no, you should be thriving in this industry and you should be doing this. And if it weren't for men and for blah, 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 I'm like, but Dad, he's like, no, my girls. I'm like, okay. So, but my mom is still of the mindset of like, well, we're going to have to ask your husband about it. I'm like, I didn't get married until I was 36.
Yeah.
7 years old. They're 35 years old.
Yeah.
I was asking my husband.
You're like, really?
He married me with a house. He moved into my house.
Yes, absolutely.
I have to ask him very much. But James comes from him being half Okinawan and growing up in Okinawa. That's a very matriarchal society.
Yeah.
Like his aunts are shaman. Everything is really run. Like the ladies don't take very much.
Yeah.
So he's like, he's just, I'm not bossy, but I'm not saying that I'm like the boss of the household, but it does mean that we have a more equally run household than my parents did.
Yeah, absolutely.
My mom did everything except for barbecue on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where the women were really kind of like keeping the pace of the family and the.
But my mom was really stressed about, like, she would come home really not unhappy with her family life, but just if there was a sock on the floor, because she really needed order, because she was really running the household and she was working. You know, baby boomers, like, they're the generation both parents worked.
Absolutely.
So she was under a lot of stress, and I don't want to be under that much stress. Like, I realized that, and my mom, everyone realizes this, but some people swallow it. I realized that, like, I'm a person with only so much time, and there's things that I want to do outside of having a family. There's things I wanted to do outside of having a family before I had a family.
Absolutely.
And I still want to do those
And that's
things.
so important for people to recognize, right? Like, that the adoption of the term, becoming a mother, or the adoption of that term does not, deny you of your identity. It shouldn't rob you of your identity, but so often, you're given these choices, especially as an artist. Like, I think about how many artists actually choose not to have children so that they can focus on their art. Did you consider this? Was this did this play into any of your kind of like life's choices?
Yeah, I didn't want to have kids. And I never, once I realized, definitely, and it wasn't under the influence of any other artist that was doing it, but once I realized that I wanted to be an artist and that might mean that I might need 2-3 jobs, I knew I didn't want kids.
Yeah.
But kids and when I met James, probably on our second date, we had that talk, that like, oh, so what do you think about kids? And he was like, I don't want. I was like, oh, shoot, me neither. And then we got pregnant with twins. It was a surprise, but it was, it is what it is. It was a nice surprise, but yeah, no, this was not a part of my plan.
Yeah.
But at the same time, once I did have kids and once I was pregnant, other artists, especially male artists, were like, oh my God, your work's going to change, or you might not work, or, you're a mom now.
Yeah.
So, like, the art world can also be very patriarchal.
Oh, absolutely. I think I'm always battling this idea of, like, in a lot of times in my work as like a curator or just, a creative or leading an organization in the art world, it's sort of like fighting to maintain ownership of my creative ideas, and like to also make sure that I have space to do those really engaging work. And I'm like, yes, there's a different level of support that I think I need, but my creativity, my ability to put things out in the world that are meaningful and universal, that hasn't changed, and so it's an interesting.
It might be a different level of support, but I mean, you gotta admit that men in general get more monetary support than women.
Yes.
And if women got just as much monetary support with or without kids, they would be able to not adjust their needs, but their needs would be fulfilled based on the monetary support that they would be receiving.
Absolutely.
So women are generally often seen, especially Black women, as being able to do more with less.
Yes.
And I know that you know this, especially in your role, that people go, oh, she has 4 kids, and but she's a strong
Black
female.
Yes. And resilient.
Right.
She's resilient.
As if you float without money.
I just
you just float.
Effortless. I'm pretending, but I'm gonna blame it on Beyonce, and I woke up like this because it's so funny. It's like this dichotomy between like things being effortless or natural or coming naturally to you, a talent or a skill, versus like the very diligent, like hard work it takes to build something that is long lasting many times. And I feel like I kind of like vacillate between those two places.
And all the things that you have to do without to do it.
Yeah.
And all the things that living in a patriarchal society don't have to do without to do it.
Absolutely. I think, I think
they're
about talking to our
more partner
males.
support than we receive.
More, yes. And the fact that the Black male experience is different, right? And I have conversations with like Black male friends all the time, and we start to unpack and analyze our trauma to try to understand each other's perceptions. And the thing that I kind of go back to is like, let's not compete about whose experience is more traumatic, because I think that's like a useless conversation. But like, how do we understand the way it impacts us and our ability to like interact or offer a greater level of support? And it feels like when I think about stress and trauma, all of these things that again are part of like a cellular memory, I feel like you begin to address them in your work. And do you feel a certain dislodge? Like, is this your place to put these things? Like, does your art become the container? Or is it more or less the process is the container for how you deal with certain stressors?
So my art really helps me to, I do a lot of, so I tell people that my art is 20% of what actually happens. 80% being the research that I do behind each piece. It just helps me to be more well-informed about, not well-informed, but I create all these symbols in the work, and it just helps me to create symbols in the work that have either double meaning, triple meaning, or just are play in our society in a way that I would not have seen before. So I unpack it in the work, and I try to, but I also, the research behind every piece that's made, it just allows for a richer conversation to happen around the issue that the work is trying to narrate.
Yeah.
And so that's really where it comes into play, really.
Yeah, and it's so helpful to hear you talk about the research, because I think so often, there's like this mystification about what happens in one studio, and for so many artists, research is such an important part of their work. So it's always good to hear about people's processes around research. I think my final question for you is, what can the world expect from Katrina Andry? What are you interested in doing next? What is important to you? What are you working on?
Right now, I'll be in that tricentennial show at the NOMA.
Yes.
That opens next week.
I'll be going to it.
Are you really?
I am.
Okay, so I'll see you there. We got a babysitter.
Yeah,
so we'll be ready.
I'm very excited.
So I have an installation there that addresses, for New Orleans' 300th anniversary, people kind of expect you to be like in celebratory mode, and it's something to celebrate. We made it 300 years.
Yeah.
But my last name being Andry, and coming the largest slave rebellion in the South was the Andry Rebellion.
Yes.
And somehow connected. So I got to be a little bit of a rebel on this. Yeah. I'm making a work called Divest, Diverge, Deny, Repeat. And it's just how throughout New Orleans history, even before it was a part of America, that they divested in communities of color, diverged funds from communities of color, and denied access to communities of color throughout its 300 years. So that's what will be up for.
Oh, this is so important. This is great. I cannot wait to see this work, and I'm so grateful that you took time today, to catch up with me personally, but also just to share. I just think your work is so powerful, so present, so needed now, and so I just really want to say thank you.
Oh, thanks, Gia. Yes. It's always good to see you.
Yeah, you too.